Hello and welcome back to Comics Over Time. This season, which we're calling Murdock and Marvel, a history of Marvel Comics starring Daredevil, we're breaking down the year in the comic book industry in two parts. In part one, we'll look at the state of the comic book industry as a whole, as well as what things were going on in society that may have impacted the comic book industry during that year. We'll talk big picture about what's going on at DC and independent comics, then we'll shift our focus to Marvel. We'll look at who is creating comics, what new characters or storylines were introduced, and which comics debuted or ended. In part 2, we'll dive deep into Marvel's longest-running characters, Matt Murdock. We'll look at what the year had in store for the Man Without Fear, key things that happened, and who joined or left his world before spotlighting one key issue or story. From there, we'll wrap up the year's discussion with a takeaway before moving on to another year and a whole new discussion. We're excited to have you join us on a trip through comic book history. We are back with another new year, single episode for 2019. My name is Dwayne. With me, as always, is my good buddy Dan. Dan, how you doing?
Excellent. We are nearing Christmas. For those of you who are hanging out with us, I think this will come out right around probably the New Year or somewhere around there. So, yeah, 2025 going out with a bunch of comics reading, as has most of my years previous, I guess. So.
I was going to say, that doesn't seem like an uncommon sort of scenario. Before we get started talking about 2019, though, we did get an email from a listener. Dan, why don't you share with us what you heard?
Yeah, Lena of the previously or often of the Moon Knight podcast that we listen to regularly, Into the Night, actually wrote in talking about the fact that has been a little bit behind on the podcast, which I can empathize with because I'm behind on almost all of my podcasts, but also just about the fact that we've not had a lot of guests on, and that if we would be looking to maybe get a little bit more information on sort of what they think about Daredevil and like, they'd be interested in guesting. We have talked about having guests on since we began this with our Moon Knight stuff like half a decade ago. How many guests
yes.
have we actually had the confidence and the courage to ask onto our show, Dwayne?
I think we've had one.
Have we?
We had our friend.
Did Ken come on once?
We had Mike on once, and I think we had Ken on once.
Really?
So I think we've had two guests in our entire time. Suffice to say, we've talked about it doing a lot more than just one or two that we've actually had to this point.
I would love to do more of that and see if we can find a way to, especially because you've got a number of folks who, like Lena, have really opened up kind of the way I think about not only comics but other things. You know, a lot of the folks that I listen to on other podcasts or we've gotten reader mail from have really been interesting. And I think that as we explore our next podcast option, finding ways to make sure that we can actually get the ability to get out and get some other folks on the show would be fun. So if you're another folks who've been fans of the podcast for a long time, I know we've got a lot of folks who've been with us now for most of that half decade. Let us know if you'd be interested in coming out and visiting with us, because we are looking into ways to make that happen.
Yes, we would love to get some additional voices on the podcast, get some other viewpoints of the content that we're reading. I think it would be great, and definitely something that we would like to do on the regular with the next iteration, I think, of the Comics Over Time.
Yep, that sounds exactly right. So, kind of in keeping with this, sort of on a similar vein, Dwayne has had some big news in his life actually happening. He's going to be making a pretty substantial career change, and so that's going to involve some time on your part and maybe some impacts on the podcast. What do you got to tell us about that, sir?
So I ended up leaving my job involuntarily in October and have been looking for a new position and just this last week. Found out that I'd be starting a new position in January. It's in a completely different field, doing entirely new things. And there's some licensing that I need to get done, certifications that need to be done in order for me to keep said job. So I need to focus on that sort of thing. And plus, Dan, you have something coming up as well that is going to curtail the amount of time that you have as well.
Yeah, actually, I have been studying history and working on history my entire, basically, life. I love doing that. I've got a master's, and I am now actually, for the first time, going to be teaching college history this spring. So that also is going to take a bunch of my time. What this means, gentle listener, is that we're probably going to be taking about 4-month, 5-month, maybe 6-month sabbatical in terms of this podcast, because Dwayne especially just needs to make sure he gets done what he needs to, and I think for me as well, having not been in an academic classroom as a teacher for quite a while, basically since I was a grad student, I think it would be really good for me to also spend the time making sure I'm ready. So we will return, but after we finish up the next 5 or 6 weeks, we will be taking a break.
Yes, we're going to get through 2025 of Daredevil, and then we will be, before we switch to something else, which we're still in talks about what that exactly is going to look like. We hadn't actually come to a decision on that, so it ends up working out that this gives us a little bit more time to try and figure that out as well. But yeah, we're going to be taking some time to be able to do the things we need to get done, and then we will keep you apprised via social media, and we'll probably release maybe a little audio thing on the feed once we have a better idea of what we're going to be doing, when we're going to start doing it, all that sort of thing. So please keep us in your feed if you've been listening, and you'll get updates.
And we're not done yet. So you've still got another month or two before we're out of here.
Yes, we still have 6 years after, including today.
Yep, because 2025 will be done and in the can, and we'll be able to do a review of that by the time we get around to the end of the year. So,
yeah. All right. With all that said, I think we better move in and let's start talking about 2019. Dan, just high level. What was 2019 as far as comics goes, Marvel, that sort of thing?
2019 in comics essentially is dominated by one thing, and that is that Marvel Studios completed this year the most ambitious movie cycle in the history of cinema, with a $2.7 billion masterpiece called Avengers Endgame that just sort of brought everything together and somehow successfully took the better part of like 15 movies, dozens of characters, and gave everybody an ending they were happy with. Which just does not happen in the modern world, right? Interesting, though, even as this was happening, comic stores were wondering about their future, and politics was making deeper and deeper inroads into comics and comics fandom in ways that kind of were shaking a lot of things kind of to the core.
Yeah, all right. So why don't we jump in and let's talk about the year in comics. The year in comics. All right, Dan. 2019, the masterpiece that was Avengers Endgame, that second half of the big Avengers two-parter that started with Infinity War last year. Yeah, that I forgot that thing made like $2.8 billion, billion with a B. That is just crazy.
2.799. It did not make $2.8 billion.
Jeez. Okay, but that was far from the only big movie that came out this year.
Absolutely, yeah. We had so many movies that came out. DC had 2 of them. Shazam, which I actually liked pretty well. The first Shazam movie was entertaining. Made like $400 million. It was a decent enough success. We got a second one. The Joker came out this year and ended up making 1.1 almost billion. So it's one of $3 billion movies this year. It's very different in tone from a lot of the other ones, right?
Yeah.
It's very dark. It's a movie that didn't necessarily appeal to everyone, but the people who liked it really loved it, and it made a lot of money. The Kitchen came out, which is a Vertigo imprint, an adaptation that didn't make hardly any money. The Hellboy reboot came out without Ron Perlman in it, and that did okay, but not great. Men in Black International made, I think it was 250 or 300 million, which was considered a financial disappointment, if not an outright failure, which is crazy to think of where we're at now with movies, right?
Right.
That was originally from Aircel. It was a Polar movie that was an adaptation of a Dark Horse story, and something called Random Acts of Violence, which came out, which was adapted off of Image. There's also one movie I just want to note as sort of the anti-Endgame, something called Rotten Tail, adapted out of a graphic novel or story from SourcePoint, made $3,383 in its
Oh my goodness.
in its cinema release, which is crazy. Like, you'd think friends and family going to see it, it would make more than $3,383. But in any case, as far as Marvel and Sony, we had Dark Phoenix, which was the Dark Phoenix story told yet again. We had Far From Home, which was our second $1 billion movie, made 1.133 billion. Very successful. That's the Tom Holland Spider-Man. We had Captain Marvel, which came out from Marvel Studios. This came out before Endgame. It made 1.13 billion. So Endgame or Far From Home and Captain Marvel made almost the exact same amount. And then of course Endgame blew them all away. But there were 4 comic book movies that made over 1 billion with a B dollars at the box office.
That is absolutely crazy.
No.
I wonder if I don't think we're ever getting to that point again.
Not in the current cycle. Something big would
No.
happen. You'd have to have another real resurgence of somebody building a superhero universe everybody loves and really getting that excitement back up again.
Yeah.
But I think the problem is it's almost like, you had that Game of Thrones fervor for however many years. It would be difficult to get that fervor back again now, just because. Right. And I think it's kind of that way with comics. It's going to take a while.
Yeah.
On TV, we also. Oh, go ahead.
So let's switch to the small screen then. What was going on TV as far as adapted from the comics?
So this was interesting. DC had a fantastic year of debuts. They brought out Doom Patrol, which is insane, but really, really good stuff. Swamp Thing, which actually was a pretty good first season, but evidently got canceled because Warner didn't get the tax breaks that they wanted out of the place they were filming or something. So in a snit,
goodness,
they decided to just cancel it. Pennyworth came out as a sort of a different adaptation of Batman's butler and the retelling of his youth. And I think that also, had 3, 4, maybe more seasons. It was very successful. Batwoman came out, which was the Kate Kane Batwoman. That actually started out pretty well, but there were problems where I think the lead actress decided she didn't want to be Batwoman anymore, and they had to replace the character. A number of things worked against that show. It didn't last very long. And then the Watchmen adaptation, which is not the Watchmen graphic novel. It is different, but it's also a really strong story.
That I remember watching. They made it available for free streaming during COVID. HBO did, and I watched it at that point, and it was quite well done. And that was actually before I'd seen I had not read the graphic novel to that point. So, yep. But I still I thought it was a very well done story.
Yeah. We also then, from other publishers, V-Wars came out, which is based on an IDW property. The first season of Umbrella Academy comes out from Dark Horse. I absolutely love Umbrella Academy. My daughter loved Umbrella Academy. I think that's one of the things where she first really started going, where do I get the comics for this sort of stuff? And I was able to get her the Umbrella Academy comics out of my collection. And then Stumptown, which is based on an Oni graphic novel or series of stories, was a sort of a private detective kind of story. I loved the comics, and I really liked Stumptown the series as well. I think it made it only like 2 years, though. Didn't last a whole long time. But it was a great year of TV show introductions.
Yeah, that seems like a very solid set of adaptations on the small screen as well. All right, so let's go to the comic book sales and what was going on in comic book shops. You mentioned there was a little bit of turmoil or unrest or
Yeah,
concerns at the comic book store.
yeah. So comics did 530 million in shops, up 2.5% from the previous year. But a couple of things going on. First is Marvel in this year in the shops was 45% of all comics sold. DC was 40%, or was 31%. In terms of sales, it was 40% and 30. So 75% of all the comics sold at LCSs were from the big two. And that really becomes difficult in terms of how you keep the entire industry going. Um, by some estimates also, up to 59% of all of the individual like UPC codes or SKUs were variant covers of other issues.
Oh goodness.
And so because of that, a lot of the folks at the comic shops are just going, we're drowning in variant covers and having to order 10 copies or 10 different covers for a single book and everything like this. I think the problems they were having were that while they're getting a slight uptick to 2.5% of an increase, you're looking at 570 million in the book channel, 90 million in digital sales. So the book channel is actually selling more comics than the comic book store. And 75% of that, like 765 million of it, is graphic novels between the bookstores and the local comic shops. Only 355 million is comic books. So comic books are kind of the bread and butter of the LCS, and they're actually not growing hardly at all. You've got this blossoming of comic sales, but it really is about collected editions and graphic novels and stuff like this, which is starting to worry a lot of these guys because they're like the people who really love periodical floppy comics are getting older and older and older, and our newer generations mostly are reading things in collected editions. How does this impact us when our whole business model is sort of built around, Wednesday Warriors and people coming in every week and buying new comics? And so, yeah, I think there is some worry there, but industry overall was up 11% in terms of sales. So it was a good year for comics.
All right, so let's highlight some of the notable comics that you have listed from 2019 here. This is, again, not by any stretch of the imagination an exhausted list. This was just some books that came out this year that you wanted to highlight.
The actual list these years is exhausting because there's so much.
Yes.
But Detective 1000 came out and kind of led the year. It sold more than any other comic this year. And in fact, it sold more than all but one book in the 21st century. So,
wow.
Very, very good sales on that. Spawn 300 was a top seller. Marvel Comics 1000. So Marvel Comics hadn't been publishing a Marvel Comics for ages, but they came out with a 1000 this year. I don't know, figuring it would have been right about now if they'd have had one or something like this.
Sure.
The big crossovers were House of X for Marvel and Deceased for DC. Among the books that I'd highlight were things like They Called Us Enemy by George Takei. This Was Our Pact by Andrews. Second Coming by Russell and Pace, which is essentially a story of what would happen if Jesus came back down today. Man, Mark Russell does the most just challenging and sometimes tasteless work, and I absolutely love it. So Second Coming was a lot of fun. These Savage Shores by Ram V, Wasted Space by Michael Marici. Marici actually does a lot of novels. He does a lot of comics. Wasted Space is just great science fiction. Gene Luen Yang came out with Superman Smashes the Klan this year, which is a lot of fun. That was sort of a graphic novel. Jamie Hernandez of Love and Rockets came out with a new edition this year called Is This How You See Me? And then on the sad side of things, one of my favorite comic strips of recent years, Giant Days, actually ended this year. John Allison and Max Serin sort of hung up the series at, I think, 54 issues. So that was a lot of fun. Missed that book.
You so let's talk a little bit about politics in comics, because you did mention that there was definitely some politics kind of encroaching on comics this year. Looks like there's a number of things you've got noted here there.
Yeah, we'll get to that a little more during the takeaway as well. But just as a note, and this is kind of just something to highlight as we're going along, it's becoming more and more difficult in America, in sort of this era of Trump and the like, to actually do any sort of more sarcastic or, or editorial cartooning or comics. And what we saw this year was a number of people get in trouble for essentially making comic art. There's a non sequitur comic strip that actually got dropped from a number of newspapers because it had put in some sort of semi-hidden anti-Trump content. The New York Times had problems a couple of times and actually ended up dropping political cartoons entirely from the paper. Something was a proud tradition of
Yeah,
sort of
I
making fun
remember
of
that. Yeah.
I mean, that's political cartoons have been fantastically important over the hundreds of years, really, as a way of sort of making fun of those in power and holding them to account in a way that people kind of can laugh, but also gain a little bit of perspective on things. So the fact that essentially our political climate has started to shut down political cartoonists is not good for our overall political discourse. Similarly, Mad Magazine actually stops print publication and ended new creation of stories and material. So they continued as just an online, sort of like reprint magazine. And even within comics themselves, Marvel refused to publish an essay from Art Spiegelman, of course, of Maus, because it criticized Trump. And Marvel, in their response, said that they wanted to stay apolitical, so they were refusing to publish it. Now, the problem is, of course, you can't stay apolitical in that situation, right?
No,
Because publishing it is maybe a political act. Not publishing it is also a political act.
definitely.
And so, because of that, maybe there was no win for them, but nonetheless, it wasn't a good look in a lot of ways, especially with Spiegelman being really one of the elder statesmen of comics.
We had some notable passings this year as well.
Yeah, it was after last year, we had the giants. We had Stan Lee die, we had Steve Ditko die. This year, we've got some folks who maybe a little bit more targeted in terms of who know them. And also, it's kind of interesting in that it's a little change in focus here as the generations change. We lost Ernie Cohen, though, who I remember as a DC artist who did a bunch of really cool stuff on Arak and Amethyst, Princess of Gemworld, and stuff like this. Howard Cruz also passed on. He had an editorial or a comic strip called Barefoots early in time, and then wrote a book called Stuck Rubber Baby. He was a cartoonist who was one of the first to actually start doing sort of like gay cartoons within a more widescreen context. Interesting note, a buddy of mine actually wrote a biography about Howard Cruz that was nominated for an Eisner a couple of years ago. So
Oh, really?
we'll mention that when we get to, I think, 2021 or 2022, something like that. But outside of that, we lost two people who kind of show that we're now getting to the point where it's not only some of the older comic creators that we're losing, but some of the early comic fans. So Bill Shelley, who wrote a book called Golden Age of Comic Fandom, passed away this year. And also Tom Spurgeon, the much beloved sort of writer and editor and the like at the Comics Journal. So Spurgeon is somebody who just everybody seems to have a good story about. But so yeah, that was the year there.
Let's look at Marvel just a little bit. They're obviously doing pretty well with regards to sales in that. Is it mostly reprints this year, or did they come out with a lot of new comics and get a bunch of new characters, or what are we seeing as far as what the year looks like?
They had like 1,700 new comics. So yeah, they're printing tons of stuff. But as far as new characters, Tiana Toombs, who's Starling, Isaac Akeda, who's Protector, a few like team up book folks. It really, in terms of new characters and the like, almost nothing at all that at least yet we know it. Now, again, it's only
Right.
been 4 or 5 years. It's possible there's someone in the margins from one of the books who's going to be reinvented to become really important soon. But as of right now, no, we're not really seeing any of that. Other than that, we had Ben Grimm get married. So we had the marriage of Grimm and Alicia Masters, his longtime girlfriend, who, interestingly enough, this is her second time marrying a member of the Fantastic Four, because
Okay.
a Skrull who was impersonating her actually married Johnny Storm back about 10 years ago or
Oh,
something.
Jesus. Okay.
Um, but other than that, we had a new Invaders comic come out this year. Um, there's a number of things like an Avengers. No Road Home was an interesting one. Again, we get just tons of different Avengers books like Savage Avengers and the like. There was a History of the Marvel Universe that came out. But really, outside of that, I think that the main thing was that House of X, Powers of X, big crossover was the thing that sort of defined the year for Marvel.
Okay.
That and some great Daredevil books, obviously.
Yes, there is a lot of Daredevil books that we get to talk about. So let's jump in and let's talk about the Eisners here real quick. This is 2019 work. These are the 2020 Eisners. What were some of the standouts that you want to highlight as far as award winning this year?
Best continuing series went to Bitter Root by David Walker, Chuck Brown, and Sanford Green. I really like David Walker's stuff, so that was a good book. Best limited series, Little Bird by Darcy Van Polkeist and Ian Bertram. Best new series was Invisible Kingdom by G. Will Wilson and Christian Ward. I also really liked Invisible Kingdom. That was a lot of fun. Best publication for kids, Guts by Reynold Tegelmeyer, which in actual fact was also the best-selling comic book of the year by factors of 10 or more over what Action Comics sold. So
Okay.
it was a runaway hit. Best writer went to Mariko Tamaki. Best writer artist, Raina Tegelmeyer. Best penciler or inker was Rosemary Valero O'Connell. Best coloring, Dave Stewart. Best lettering, Stan Sakai. Best comics related periodical went to Women Write About Comics by Nola Pfau and Wendy Brown. Best comics related book, Making Comics by Linda Berry. Best academic or scholarly work, EC Comics, Race, Shock, and Social Protest by Kiana Whitted, which is a fantastic book. If you got any interest in the old EC stuff, that is just an absolutely wonderful book, kind of talking about that and examining some of those old comics and sort of where they were ahead of their time and where they were maybe not. But overall, just great stuff.
Who was elected to the Hall of Fame this year?
Two judges' choices. Nell Brinkley, who was called the Queen of Comics back in the early 20th century. She created a character called the Brinkley Girl. And E. Sims Campbell, who created what was called Esky, the Esquire mascot. He did cartoons and illustrations for Esquire for decades and was kind of an early black cartoonist, one of the first black cartoonists to get nationwide syndication and recognition. And then, of course, we had the voters' choices. Alison Bechdel and Howard Cruz went in this year, both of whom did memoirs. Stan Sakai went in. He, of course, has Usagi Yojimbo, and not only is going in the Hall of Fame, but is winning Eisners in the year when he goes into the Hall of Fame. Right?
There you go.
Louise Simonson, who, of course, was famous for X Factor, X-Men, Power Pack. She was sort of one of the people who, as an editor and a writer, helped to guide the X-Men during a lot of its most famous time back in the late 80s and the 90s. Don and Maggie Thompson went in. They had the Comics Buyer's Guide for decades. And Bill Watterson, who, with Calvin and Hobbes, needs no introduction to pretty much anybody in America. I would say my favorite comic strip of all time. I absolutely love Calvin and Hobbes.
All right. Dan, before we jump in and start talking about the year for Daredevil, what would you say is your favorite comic from 2019?
I mean, my favorite that I was reading that I was waiting for every week or every month was Giant Days. Of the newer ones, I think Wasted Space may have been as a comic, and They Called Us Enemy by George Takei was fantastic as far as a graphic novel.
Okay, there you go. You mentioned that there was a lot of content being created at Marvel, and as such, Daredevil was one of those people that got a lot of content. We're going to go over 22 books this year.
Heavens.
Yes. So, without further ado, let's jump in and let's talk about the year for Daredevil. Year in Daredevil.
Sir. All right. So, as you say, there's a lot of stuff here. Looking through this, it's kind of interesting seeing just how many books we're seeing and all the stuff that's going on. So, give us a little bit of an idea. Who's writing, who's drawing, what sorts of stories are we getting, and how in the world did you get to the point where we're having to actually read 22 Daredevil books in 12 months?
I don't blame me, blame Marvel. They're the ones doing this. And actually a little bit is my fault in that we're going to be taking 3 books that came at the end of 2018 with the final story of volume 5. There also is a limited series, Man Without Fear, that all came out in 1 month that acts as a bridge between volume 5 and volume 6 that started this year. And we get 12 issues in volume 6. So with a new creative team. So lots there for Daredevil on his main run. He also had Marvel. He has appearances in Marvel Knights 20th, number 2, Guardians of the Galaxy number 1, Spider-Man and Deadpool issues 47, 48, Avengers No Road Home number 10, The War of the Realms 1 through 6, War of the Realms War Scrolls 1 through 3, Avengers number 20, True Believers, Spider-Man, The New Spider-Man number 1. I think that's all one title. I think.
Yeah.
I might have screwed that up, but
True Believers, Spider-Man, the New Spider-Man number 1.
Yes. War of the Realms Omega number 1, and then the History of the Marvel Universe, the 3rd volume of that. So there is a lot of appearances for Matt Murdock and Daredevil this year. As far as the main run, we have the last volume 5 run. That was Charles Soule that wrote that, and then we get a new writer for volume 6 in Chip I had it, and then Chip Zdarsky. Yes, yep. I know how to say it. It's just when I actually had to say it. And volume 6 is a new writer in Chip Zdarsky. As far as the art at the end of volume 5, it was Phil Noto, and then Marco Cicchetto is the one that actually does about half the books that we look at of the first 12 books. And then we have Lalit Kumar Sharma did issues 6 through 9, and Jorge Fornes did issue 10. And mostly they did their own books, except Jay Liston is the one that did the Sharma books as far as inks go. So pretty stable team. And then the Man Without Fear actually is our man Jed MacKay is the writer on that one. So I'm really excited to see Jed MacKay in a run for Daredevil as well. So but let's dive in and let's talk about what happens. So in the final storyline of volume 5, that is the death of Daredevil. This was a really good story. And we open with Matt Murdock on the brink of death. He's lying in an ER after being hit by a truck while saving a child, eerily echoing that childhood accident that made him Daredevil in the first place. Now, as the doctors fight to keep him alive, Matt mentally resets his mission, and he decides that this is a war against Wilson Fisk once he, gets out of this and he's like ready to go. And war requires honesty. So he goes and tells that team that he's been working with, the Inhumans and the old police guy that he's been working with. He tells them the truth, that he is Daredevil. So there is no more secrets there. So they're now another group of people that know who the secret identity is. When he gets back out on the streets, uh, he barely has time to breathe before this bone knife throwing assassin attacks him. And when he limps home afterwards, who's waiting for him in his apartment but Elektra? They fall back into old patterns, but when Matt asks her to, but this time she goes to leave, Matt asks her to stay. And he actually says stay and actually join this team. We're working to take down, Wilson Fisk. He rigged the election and all this. He actually brings her into this team that is investigating and hopes to take down Wilson Fisk. From there, Matt and his team move aggressively. They actually decide to sort of lean in to their kind of vigilantiness and decide to kidnap the right-hand man of Wilson Fisk, John Wesley, and force him to spill how the election was rigged, which I never thought that this is something Matt Murdock would do. He's just finally said, you know what? Screw this. Yep. I'm not going to shy away from this fight. This is a war. We're going to take a prisoner. We're going to get the answers we need from him because he obviously knows. The plan, however, blows up in their face, but somehow they still manage to grab Wesley. They lose some guards that following him. They get attacked by more bone knives, and they end up scrambling into a church for cover, where Wilson Fisk's assassin named Virgil, the bone knife throwing assassin, is already there waiting for them. Dan, yep. This was a sort of crazy sort of reveal in a church, and his name is Virgil, and he just suddenly there.
Yeah, this whole story is just nuts, and luckily there's a reason why it's all nuts that you're going to get to. So,
yes, we are going to get to it.
But suffice it to say that if any of you out there are like, what the heck is going on? I was feeling this way for many of the last issues. And so bring it home, Dwayne.
There is a breakneck speed in which this story goes, that basically you get thrown into that ER room and then suddenly he's like getting attacked. He's, the kidnapping Wesley, all this. So they end up fighting Virgil in the church in this absolutely brutal fight. Elektra gets the upper hand and is actually about to kill Virgil when Daredevil leaps in, stops him. And so he uses that split-second opportunity to drive a bone knife right into the back of Wesley as he's trying to escape. So the only man who presumably could tell them how Fisk rigged the election is now dead, and Elektra is now really upset that she got stopped from making sure that they could get this information, and she just walks out on him.
Nope.
Actually just crazy. So we go from there. He goes out on patrol again. He's ambushed by the stilt men. More than one stilt man. There's actually like 3 or 4 or 5 of them.
Yes.
He's forced into an arena where he's dropped into a who's who gauntlet of enemies. We've got Claw, we got Akari, we've got Electro, Gladiator, Typhoid Mary is there. Just, oh my God, all these things. But Matt turns the table on him. He manipulates the villains to fight each other for the honor of actually killing him, which of course works as it does, because all of these villains are egomaniacs, at least until he reaches the roof, hoping to catch his breath, and he immediately gets shot by Bullseye.
Yep.
Where are all of these guys coming from? It's actually crazy. Matt's seconds away from dying again when he's unexpectedly saved by his magically created, now fully real brother, Mike Murdock, who claims he can help end all of this. All the villains coming after him, Wilson Fisk as mayor, everything. It is absolutely crazy how this sort of turn of events.
Yes. And even while he's going through and looking at this, there are times where you can tell that Matt Murdock himself is just like, how does Kingpin manage to get all my foes in this one place? How is all this happening? And there's a weird sort of vibe to the whole story in a lot of ways.
Yes. Mike's intel leads Matt straight to the truth. The mad thinker helped Fisk rig the mayoral election. And with that, Matt convinces the DA to prosecute the mayor and put Daredevil himself on the witness stand, which we know he can do based on that precedent that was set a couple years ago. A parade of other heroes testify. Wilson Fisk himself gets up on the stand and slips under questioning, admitting that there were some adjustments made, but that he would have won regardless. And Fisk ends up losing his court case and is recalled as mayor. It's a victory. Yep. Everything looks happy, except Virgil then returns. Daredevil unmasks him as they're fighting. And here's where everything breaks. He sees his own face staring back at him. The illusion cracks. We realize this entire story, every moment, every battle, every twist has been in Matt's head as he lies unconscious in a hospital bed. He's still fighting for his life. And in the quiet between heartbeats, we see Karen Page beside him. She tells him gently that it isn't his time yet. The panels go dark until a single heartbeat rises from the silence. Daredevil isn't dead. He's choosing to fight. And that's the way Volume 5 ends. It is, like I said, it was an absolute breakneck story that completely blindsided me when he unmasks Vigil and sees himself looking back at him.
What issue was he actually hit by the truck?
We don't see it. It was off camera, as it were. It happened before the story started, and the story started with him in the emergency room getting looked at.
So we really don't know how far back it all goes.
No.
In terms of what was real and what was not real.
Presumably it's this entire story. Because like everything up until that point sort of makes sense. It's just this story is when it kind of goes crazy.
So if you're looking for it continuity wise, it would basically be that like Mike Murdock was still actually fictionally created.
Yes.
And is around.
Yes.
And some of this other stuff. It's just a matter of it would just be 609 through 612 or something like that, 608 or whichever one that would be the start of this story that becomes the problem. Okay.
Yes.
I was looking at that actually, and I'm like, I wonder just how far back this takes, and partly it was because of that whole the yellow costume and Karen Page thing, and I'm like, can this have been like a clue all the way back then that he was in Dream World? But no, it can't.
I don't think it quite goes that far. I think sometime after the end of the last story, or sometime before, he had created that investigation thing. They're starting to look into it, and then something happens, and he saves this kid and gets hit by the truck.
Sewell didn't just like retroactively completely write his entire run out of continuity with his last issue or something like
right that. No, I don't think he quite went like that. Yeah. So that basically takes us up through the end of February, and then in March we get the Man Without Fear limited series from writer Jed McKay and artists Danilo Beyruth, Stefano Landini, and Ivan Coelho and Paolo Villanelli.
Paolo Villanelli,
yeah.
And it might even be Vianelli.
Vianelli. It could be that. So this is a haunting bridge between Daredevil's last story in Volume 5, his fall and subsequent hospital stay, to whatever's coming next. And
This is a really interesting story, and I'm actually going to reserve that story for our spotlight this week because I think it was really well done, and I was really curious to see how they were going to get Matt from basically a single heartbeat to back up fighting crime again. And it, they don't actually go all that way, but they go a lot of that way in that book. So we'll take a look at that in more detail. But all that happened in 1 month. It was every week they put out a new issue. So then in April, Volume 6 starts with a new creative team, writer Chip Zdarsky, art by Marco Cicchetto. And the opening storyline is titled No Fear. In it, we see Matt Murdock back on the streets as Daredevil, too early, too shaky, and already in over his head. Between flashbacks of a young Matt talking to a priest, we see him struggle through patrols. He botches a robbery takedown, and he accidentally kills one of the thieves due to some head trauma. A new New York City detective, Cole North, zeroes in on him, and he immediately and refuses to play the usual look the other way game that a lot of the other police and detectives seem to be willing to do. And soon, Daredevil is shot, he's chased, he's cornered, and nearly arrested. But as Wilson Fisk, now mayor, watches from a distance, thrilled to see his old enemy unraveling. This is crazy. This is an absolutely brilliant start to this story, or this run of Volume 6. What do you think of Cole North? I actually really like this character.
Well, he's essentially a guy who comes in from Chicago, who is used to normal cities with normal police and the like.
Right.
And I think he just can't quite get around the idea that you have vigilantes out there and the like. He also, though, is new enough that he hasn't seen what Daredevil has done for the city.
Right.
So he is kind of a bull in a china shop that just is. He's for the most part a straight shooter, but it's also interesting that he has to realize that the friends he's making are the Kingpin and stuff like this, and the enemies are all of the other guys on the police and most other people. That I like him as a character and as a foil, and in actual fact, he really is like Daredevil, and Daredevil is obsessively believing in his own truth. The way he in this one becomes so obsessed with, did I kill someone? And I suspect over the last 500 issues or whatever we've been reading, the number of people who have incidentally died because Daredevil is just rampaging through their city. How many people have been killed by ninjas during various wars that are one way or another Daredevil's fault, right?
Yeah.
But this one, he's like, oh, I can't believe, now I'm a murderer. And then he kind of goes off on everybody else too. He's just got this guilt thing going. And North is kind of the same way. He just doesn't see the forest for the trees. He very much is, yeah.
It's really interesting. So the way this starts out, Matt Murdock, Daredevil, does not believe that he actually killed the guy. Or at least he's claiming he didn't. And he goes and he threatens / interrogates the doctor who basically pronounced the guy dead because of head trauma. And he's like, I don't know what to tell you. I work at an ER. I know what head trauma looks like. And that guy got his head just, bounced off pavement or something. And he couldn't handle it. And he goes a long time just being like, this obviously wasn't me. When, you see in those first few panels, he's trying to do the same old Daredevil stuff, but he can't physically do all the things he used to do because, he was just on death's door not too long ago, and he's still trying to work his way back. So obviously it is, something could happen as a result of it. And I do love, you end up having this actually fist fight between Cole North and Daredevil in the middle of the street with all these police watching. You got Mayor Fisk watching all of this, and they're just like, and North basically puts him through a freaking cop car, and like he's like, we're done. You're going to jail, and then throws him into a police car after that because yeah, he shouldn't be out there, but he's out there, and as a result, he killed somebody, and he's now run into somebody who is not going to look the other way.
Nope. Yeah, it's still though. I mean, you know, it's crazy that they're basically having a fist fight in the middle of everybody, and it reminds me. We just watched Lethal Weapon, and it reminds me a lot of the fight at the end of Lethal Weapon, where Mel Gibson's character just beats down on the guy with all the cops hanging out watching at the end of that. So it was interesting though, and fantastically done. The thing I would comment on some of this is the artwork. Marco Cicchetto's artwork in these first 5 issues is just chef's kiss.
Yes, it is really good. Yeah,
it is truly fantastic, and this is not going to be a surprise to anybody who's been reading Marvel the last couple of years, because he's been doing like Ultimate Spider-Man and just absolutely killing it for all of those issues. But Cicchetto is really, really a talented artist, not just in the fact that he's got a fine line, but all of the different angles and the cameras and everything. Just an amazing artist.
The panels are visually interesting to look at. I love the way that I love the way that the dialogue and the way the like kind of narration boxes sort of just they fit perfectly within the panels, so you're not like missing anything. The action like panels are brilliant. Like there is never any doubt exactly what's happening. It is very clean, very easy to see what's going on, and like the level of detail in there, I think, is the perfect level of detail. I absolutely love it.
Yeah, it is. There's very rarely just a blank background, but it also doesn't get busy. I would agree. Right. I think that he does have a nice mix there, just enough to, to really set the scene properly.
So as we continue, things actually spiral further as Daredevil finds himself rescued and judged by the one man he never wants to owe anything to. It is Frank Castle, the Punisher. Frank drags Matt back to his hideout and brutally challenges the idea that Daredevil is still a hero. He's got a prisoner he's holding captive. That guy dies. Blows are exchanged, and ultimately Matt escapes, injured and ashamed, just as the NYPD begins questioning Cole North's escalating methods. Hey, don't go doing a street fight, fist fight with a vigilante. Even while Wilson Fisk calls him up, quietly rewards him for keeping the pressure on. So, yeah, that's kind of crazy. So the breaking point comes when Matt is rescued from the Owl's men by Luke Cage, Jessica Jones, and Danny Rand, all street-level peers who have been watching him self-destruct in real time. After Matt admits he accidentally killed a robber, the others acknowledge they've made mistakes too. But they also agree he's too unstable to keep wearing the mask. Matt slips away, heads home, and he ends up meeting with Spider-Man, who's waiting for him in his apartment. And he delivers the final gut punch. Matt's done. No more Daredevil, and if he ever suits up again, his own friends are going to stop him. I just floored by this. Yep. Actually, I'm not surprised because he shouldn't be out there. He is going to get somebody innocent killed, even though he's already killed a potentially bad guy. But more innocent people are going to get hurt than I think are going to be able to get helped.
Yep, and Spider-Man is one of those guys also who has, that great power comes great responsibility. He is someone who could literally kill somebody with a punch pretty much every time he's out on patrol. So he's like, it's one thing to go out and help people, but you've got to be in control. And Matt, obviously, right now, with his physical injuries and his mental problems, he is not in control.
Yeah. Yeah. So the final story arc of 2019 is called No Devils, Only God. 8 weeks after Daredevil has died, that confrontation with his street level hero friends, Matt Murdock is trying hard to live a normal life. He's working now as a probation officer, meeting ex-cons, even starting a romance with Mindy from a local bookstore. But the shadows keep tugging at him. NYC is shifting. Wilson Fisk is secretly beating on inmates to a pulp while publicly claiming he's gone legit. And Cole North is now being targeted by dirty cops and nearly killed. And he seems to be this lone detective trying to clean up the precinct, drowning in corruption. Yeah, he actually gets kind of attacked by a group of them in a park. And it actually is weird because it was one of the Owl's men that comes and saves him. And he's like, thanks for getting rid of Daredevil for us as a result. So, things not going great. Matt finds himself drawn into Mindy's family dinner, and he realizes her in-laws are the Librous crime family. Just moments before a sniper attack, courtesy of the Owl, leaves one man wounded, and Matt's forced to intervene without revealing who he once was. I don't know.
Yeah, unlikely.
I don't know.
Also, the fact that the family name is Libris, and she's like a bookseller, is just too on the nose. I mean, that feels like old Archie comics, or like 1960s Marvel type of thing. So, nonetheless, it's all good. It's also very weird because it's like Matt is basically attracted to this woman, and so he keeps going there, and he's like, "Yeah, sure, I'll come up and have dinner with you and your husband and family."
Yeah.
So
yeah. He and like, yeah, it is really, and like he went there to get Foggy a birthday present, and like suddenly he falls head over heels with this woman who basically is like, I'm not looking for a creeper, I'm married. And then suddenly he just keeps showing up, and then suddenly she's like, hey, would you like to come have dinner with me and my family? And then he gets there and he's like, oh, hey, I know you. You're a head of a, major crime family here in New York. I should have put two and two together. It's sort of weird.
Yeah.
All right.
I like the story of kind of the family history that goes with it, and talking about the Ma leader of the crime family is not someone to be messed with. So
that whole issue of the actual dinner was really interesting because they end up talking a lot about who's really the villain, and like a lot of the villain things that are going on are totally legal and people get away with them daily, and it's just because they have power and have said that it's not illegal to do. So people raising rents to obscene amounts, and just keeping like the poor and downtrodden as the other, the rich people keep getting richer.
Yep.
All right. So as this story continues, we get that sniper attack, and Matt actually saves one of them from getting shot by that. He ends up going and speaking to Reed Richards and starts talking about God and what is expected of him as he, thinks about what he's wrestling with the idea of coming back as Daredevil, and whether or not he should do it.
Mm-hmm. He's also playing chess with Mr. Fantastic. What kind of moron plays chess against the smartest guy in the universe, right? He loses.
Loses. Yes. I mean, we're yeah. So he ends up jumping into a makeshift costume after talking with Reed to save a runaway boy from gang life, and that taste of heroism only deepens the conflict. Meanwhile, Matt's relationship with Mindy crosses into a full-on affair, complicating everything just as the Owl escalates his war on the Libris family, burning down their bookstore, which pulls Matt even deeper. Cole North gets targeted again. His partner gets beaten up so badly that he later dies, and the rest of the police force that set him up then kind of puts the precinct on lockdown, and then plans on executing Cole North in the police station. It is actually the most surreal thing I think I've ever seen. Matt Murdock happens to be there because one of his ex-cons has gotten arrested, and he actually joins North in the police station brawl, and he actually stops the detective from killing one of the corrupt officers and tells him to pin all the chaos on Daredevil. As Matt slips away into the night, bleeding and conflicted, he finds Elektra waiting on a rooftop, and it seems like only a matter of time until Matt Murdock is putting that mask back on for real. And that is actually how we end 2019. It is an unbelievable, just breakneck is the word I would use. The whole year of stories has been just nonstop action. And the thing I will say about Volume 6 that I really love is I am a big character fan and watching character development go, and I almost like that more than action, but there is a good amount of character development as well as a lot of action in these Chip Zdarsky, Marco Checchetto books.
There you go. I'm going to have some questions for you about just how good our man Daredevil is this year, by the way.
There's not good.
He has moral and ethical and physical lapses of numerous sorts over this time. What did you think of The Last Artist, Jorge Fornes?
He didn't really stand out to me necessarily. Was there something about his work that you took note of?
I really did like it. It was different, but it had kind of almost like a Greg Lark, Gotham Central kind of feel to me in some ways. It got really noisy because the lettering was huge in a lot of areas. A lot of the sound effects and everything were basically brought right into it. But overall, I thought it was Checchetto was my favorite artist of the year. Fornes at the end, probably second, and then the middle books were probably my third favorite. All of them did a good enough job, but I would say that I really enjoyed the art at the beginning and the end of the year here. I do wish the coloring was different again, because yet again we've got a lot of that subdued coloring going on in these.
Yeah, it's a little bit darker look.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. What did you think of Volume 6 so far?
So Volume 6, as we're going in, was Zdarsky starting up here.
Yeah.
I enjoy it. I think it's interesting that it is much more character driven. It is, again, sort of trying to get back to Matt Murdock. But interestingly, it's a Matt Murdock who doesn't talk to Foggy much. It's a Matt Murdock who doesn't necessarily have a job as a lawyer and stuff like that. He's working other jobs and wandering around meeting new people. And there's that whole idea of kind of taking away the costume from him and seeing what's underneath. So everybody finds a new way to make Daredevil's life difficult when they take over this book.
Yeah.
And I think I like Zdarsky's so far. He is a really good writer. He also has Daredevil be, I think, a lot more sort of flawed than maybe many of the other ones have. There are points in this where it's like he complains at himself. He's always angry at himself, but he doesn't really do anything to fix the things he's angry at himself about.
Yeah.
You know?
There's definitely some of that.
So, but anyways.
The So the thing I would say is, so I was trying to keep track of everything that was going on, and I was making notes as I'm reading, and I was making notes after reading each book, and I was having to do like almost a page of notes for every single book because you have this like really intricate story, right? And there's like it's all one big story, but at the same time, there's like 4 or 5 stories that are sort of kind of being told all at the same time, and they all have intersection points and that sort of thing. And so, like, as I'm putting notes together, I have to do notes about this story and this person and this story and this person, and so it ends up being and every book it feels like there's a little bit of movement on every single story and every single character, and it needs to be noted because it makes, you know, what ends up happening later on, and you know, if you're not noting it as it's happening, it doesn't make sense where they get to at the end. So it ends up being, there just ends up being a lot there. It's very dense, but at the same time it's like really quick read and visually striking as I'm going through.
Yep, absolutely. Yeah, it's and I will note that, you know, the last 2 books he returned to Chichetto's art, and I like it a lot more when he's drawing than when anybody else is drawing, or at least of this group.
Yeah.
So
yeah,
but yeah, it's so much going on, so many characters to keep track of, so many different things that he's kind of trying to balance. It's interesting, and I kind of know where it's going because this is, you know, I had pre-pandemic, I'd kind of, because of the kids being, you know, keeping me busy, I'd gotten behind on a lot of stuff and wasn't necessarily getting every book every month. So I was reading these when I could. But we're coming into pandemic era now when Zdarsky does a lot of stuff on Daredevil, and I really like the approach he takes.
yeah. Well, we've still got a spotlight book, or actually set of books, a limited series of books. So we should probably dive in and let's talk about the spotlight for this week.
This week's Spotlight Story.
All right. Isn't this the point where you tell us that we're running a bit long, but we're...
Yes, we are running a bit long, so we are going to have
keep
to
up the fiction, Dwayne. Keep up
Yeah.
the fiction.
Yeah.
But we got our spotlight. 5 issues. Man Without Fear limited series, March 2019. It's an interesting one. The bridge, like you said, between the old and the new. What was series 5.5 of Daredevil? Tell us about it.
So like I said, I really love this. The artwork is cool. The story is great. We open with Matt Murdock at his absolute lowest. He's broken, bandaged, barely clinging to life in a hospital bed. Foggy sits beside him, begging him to stay alive because the world still needs Matt Murdock. And I love the way he said that too. But inside Matt's mind, a storm is raging. He's fighting twisted, demonic versions of himself wearing old Daredevil suits. Literal embodiments of fear trying to convince him that Daredevil is gone for good. And just as we settle into the dread, issue 2 flips the script with narration by Karen Page, and her silhouette still lingering in the window like a ghost Matt can't let go of. Absolutely brilliant. And he ends up waking up at the end. So we have these first 2 books are basically him just fighting for his life. Once Matt wakes up, things don't get any easier. Samuel Chung, Blind Spot, visits him, desperate to reignite that spark of heroism. But Matt insists Daredevil is dead and that he's broken beyond repair. The argument gets heated, and it ends with Sam calling Matt a coward. One of the harshest blows I think he's ever taken, and he takes a lot of blows. Then Kirsten McDuffie arrives, full of forgiveness and hope, promising to help him through rehab, but fear doesn't leave Matt alone for long, and the fear demon torments him with cruel visions of Kirsten dying, whispering doubts about Karen and about Matt's worth, and by the time she returns to help him with the rehab, Matt pushes her away with a single devastating remarks that sends her running from his room in tears, which, dang it, Matt, dang it.
He's planning on quitting. Why is he, what's his reason now?
Yeah, we don't know what he said, We
Yeah.
just know that, she was coming there excited to help him and be with him, despite the fact that he basically just dropped her and moved back to New York. And then he says something, and she's literally in tears as she leaves. It sucks. So Matt actually starts then rehab, and Luke Cage, Jessica Jones, Janie Rand step in to help him as he tries to learn to walk again, and by reminding him of the hero he used to be. So obviously they know who he is. We even get a flashback to a time the four of them saved Ben Urich from some villain called the Fool Killer.
Yep.
He was kind of weird, with Matt literally putting his head in front of a gun to protect his friend. But in the present, every attempt to stand ends with pain and frustration. Eventually, he quits, defeated and furious at his own body. And just when you think things can't get any worse, Wilson Fisk strolls into the hospital room like a shadow falling across Matt's life. Matt pretends to be asleep, terrified, as Fisk reminisces about past fights where Daredevil stumbled blindly in a snowy trap that he had laid for him. Fisk finally leans in and says he's considering killing Matt right then and there. And it's then that Matt opens his eyes and dares Fisk to do it. Like, oh my God. It was so it was like seeing Daredevil sort of wake up again. Fisk backs off, leaves with a smug "get well soon" as he walks out the door. Actually, just fantastic the way that whole issue went, because it's like a couple years ago where he was fighting Kilgrave, and Kilgrave was just beating the snot out of him, and then he said he said fear.
Mhm.
He accused him of being afraid, and it was like this light switch flipped. It was that same sort of thing with Wilson Fisk right here. He's sitting there, talking about this trap that he had set and all this, and he's thinking great of himself, and then he's like, I could just, put my hands around your neck and just kill you right now, and Daredevil would have one less friend in the world, and maybe I should do that because that's the kind of thing I would do. And it's that moment he's just like, because he's sitting here listening to him reminisce out loud, and he dares him to do it. And I actually loved that, because it was a visual turning point in this whole recovery process.
Yep. Yeah, it is also amazing just how, these guys are just little man babies that you can taunt and get a rise out of, and it's always, you insult their manlyhood, and then they have to take themselves up off of the hospital bed or whatever. It's kind of crazy, but it was good seeing these guys. Different people come through, and then different iterations of his own costume taunting him as they go along and everything like that. It is also weird that we've seen God knows how many things happen to him, and all these various problems, and yet it's essentially just getting hit by a truck while trying to save somebody in the city. That is the thing that finally actually breaks him.
Yeah.
So he gets hit by a truck to gain his powers, and then theoretically he gets hit by a truck now, and that's what finally ends him, and he loses his powers. So,
Yeah.
And also interesting that he didn't get hurt as Daredevil. He was just sort of on the street as Matt Murdock, and he saw what was going on and threw himself in front of the truck, and that's how he got broken.
Yeah. All right. So as the story wraps up, Matt drags himself back to his feet, fueled by the echo of Jack Murdock's one lesson to his son: everyone suffers. We watch him go from barely standing to walking to running to taking out his frustrations and anger on a punching bag. Each movement a small act of defiance. The fear demon returns for one last jab, hissing that he's too weak and that the world is going to kill him. Matt doesn't hesitate, saying, quote, "I've fought them before, and I'll fight you too. And with that, he pushes past the fear. The story closes with Foggy returning to Matt's hospital room, only to find it empty. No note, no fanfare, just a silent message. Matt Murdock is back on his feet, and somewhere out there, the man without fear is back again.
There you go.
Just a great story. And I read it in order. So I read the end of volume 5. I read this, and then I was like immediately into volume 6 because that's how great this story was. It really just pushed me right into wanting to know what was going to happen going forward, which I have to imagine was the whole point of this story, right?
Yep, absolutely. That is interesting, though. I mean, 5 issues in 1 month. That's a substantial wallet breaker for Daredevil fans that month. That's kind of crazy.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think that was a nice way to sort of give you that ability to sort of have a buffer between the various instances or volumes, and then we go from yet again a strong Daredevil story into another strong Daredevil story, and again each of them has kind of their own focus and their own kind of take on the character and what's important to them and whatever. So pretty cool.
Yeah. All right. Let's jump in and let's do those rapid fire questions.
You'll be interested on this one. So let's begin. Who's Matt Murdock in love with this year?
He's not really anybody during that death of Daredevil, but he's got Mindy in the new volume, who turns out to be, part of a crime family. So yeah, that's
So is there anything in the Bible about sleeping with someone from a crime family? I don't think there is.
No, probably not.
How about is there anything against sleeping with someone who's married to another person?
There is that, yes.
There is that though, right?
There is that, yeah.
So yeah, he that might not have been his best plan. He also starts the year by essentially picking up some woman in a bar. So he is a man on the hunt for most of this one, it seems. But yeah, he's at the very least sort of semi-obsessed by this Mindy, if nothing else. Who's our biggest villain this year?
So, can I say a truck?
Kind of.
For the death of Daredevil, it's a truck. And then like for volume 6, I almost think Daredevil is the biggest villain in the year.
Yeah, he is his own biggest problem. Other than that, it would be Cole North, with of course the Kingpin behind at all.
Right.
Times.
Yeah.
How about law? Matt practicing law this year?
He is not practicing law at all. He's a probation officer now.
No, yes, indeed. Anybody new know Matt's identity?
So we thought there was the investigative team, but it turns out that was all in his head. So it seems like right now the only people are some of those other street level heroes, Luke Cage, Jessica Jones, Danny Rand, that seem to know.
Spider-Man, I think, phoned
and possibly Spider-Man, yeah.
Because he took his mask off and gave it to him.
Yeah.
So I don't know if Spider-Man already knew, or he even said something. No, he said, I've been through your house, but I didn't look at your stuff. I still don't know who you are. How that exactly works, I don't know. Yeah. It's obvious it's not going to be hard for him to figure out if he wants. Is Daredevil still a good guy this year?
No. You as you point out, sleeping with a married woman is not great. He killed somebody, whether it be an accident or not, and then didn't take is blaming other people for several issues before finally admitting it himself, and then treating other people that have had similar accidents as if they're murderers. yet not treating yourself the same way. So the double standard there. He is not a good guy this year.
He's he's on the downswing right now. How about outfit? Any outfit changes?
No, he's just back to the red costume,
Except when he
and
has no costume.
yeah. He I guess for most of this year, he is not actually in a costume. He is in a makeshift sort of mask thing over his face, and that's about the extent of it.
Where have we seen that before? They're definitely riffing off of Daredevil, the Netflix show. And I mean, you're seeing the Defenders cast, essentially the Netflix cast has now become sort of like secondary characters in the book. And he a lot of times is looking an awful lot like early Matt Murdock back before he put on the costume. How about Matt's past? Anything new on that?
I mean, we did see some things about his father in that lesson during the limited series, and I think there was some other stuff during Volume 6 as well. Some very small references.
Biggest moment of the year. What for you is the biggest moment of the year? I know I have mine.
I think Daredevil killing a guy and then like finally admitting that he killed the guy. Like it took most of the 12 issues of Volume 6 that we read for him to finally admit it. But like that was a huge moment, I think. And also, you know, being told don't be Daredevil or we're coming after you seems like a pretty big moment as well.
To me, it was the unmasking of Vigil. That was to me the biggest moment because it's the point where everything fell apart and then made sense again. And so that was kind of a big rubber band.
That's a big moment, yeah. All right, that is our look at Daredevil. There was a lot to get through. I'm really excited to see where Chichetto and Zdarsky take the character in 2020. I only hope that it's slightly less issues to do so, because this was a lot of ground to cover.
Yep.
But we got one more piece of business before we end the episode. We've got a takeaway to get to. This week's takeaway. All right, Dan, what's the standout thing, or what's the thing you want to leave us with when we think about 2019?
I think the thing that interested me most when I was looking at this was that, and in kind of an increasingly polarized America, you have in the Cineplexes this year $2 billion movies in The Joker and Captain Marvel, which could not be farther apart in terms of the way they were received, and in fact the audience that was going to them in many cases. There were a number of people like me who would go to both of them and be able to appreciate and enjoy both of them. A lot of people went to one or the other almost as a way of pissing off the people going to the other one. Right? And we already had this sort of starting in the world of comics. You know, and with $1 billion for both of them, that shows there's a lot of people interested in sort of the grindier, sort of Daredevil kind of style of comic books. You know, very masculine content, a lot of punching, this sort of stuff. There's also, though, an awful lot of people out there, especially younger folks, who are reading a lot of the stuff that is more progressive leaning, and that, you know, has more women and people of color and all this other sort of stuff in. And the fact that Captain Marvel came in and made all that money as the first superhero film ever helmed by a female character and, you know, a female actress, was huge, because most of the movies that had starred female characters had flopped. The Catwomans, the original Supergirl, all of this sort of stuff. So this was huge. But
the blowback on both sides on this just makes it hard to look at how you can have a comic book sort of ecosystem where everybody just gets along and goes to the same convention. And so I think this is interesting that you have both of these in the same year, and then that we do have obviously some of the companies like Marvel already getting a lot of political pressure on them to essentially modify their content and their way of doing business to try and deal with this new ecosystem in a way that's not going to get them in trouble. So it's very difficult to be Marvel or DC right now. Between the stuff that's going on with Zack Snyder and people trying to get back the Snyderverse and everything like this, or support the Snyderverse, what's going on with Joker and Captain Marvel, a lot of the stuff just in terms of some of the online content getting, or conversations and fights getting pretty fierce. I'm glad we're not going too far into some of this stuff. The history that's going to be written of this time in comics is going to be very interesting. That said, man, were there a lot of great comic books to look at this year. And so, outside of all of these big fights and the sort of, wars going on top, there's a lot of great comic books being made. So, we'll just kind of keep riding along with that. Keep your head down and see what's there. So, it is depressing right now, though, to read the year in comics reviews and see how much of it is infused by political controversy instead of just great comic books.
Yeah. Yeah. No. I would love to say that this gets to be easier question, but it feels like this is still a problem today.
Yeah.
Right.
The takeaway could be the same thing every year, except for the fact that we're not going to have billion-dollar comic book movies competing every year moving forward.
Right.
And it's possible, in fact, that in some ways these fights, pre-pandemic, did do sort of some mortal damage to comic books. Because while there were some big bursts of spending and the like during the pandemic on comics, there really has been, as far as TV and movies and a lot of popular culture, a sort of retrenchment. And it might just be that a lot of the rest of the world doesn't want to deal with our shit. And so if you're not really invested in comic books and you see all of these brouhahas and the like, you're just like, I did not want to be a part of that part of the world.
Right.
And you go off and do something else.
Yeah. No, I definitely could see that. All right. Very interesting discussion. There was a lot that happens in 2019, but I think that's going to put a wrap on it for us for this week. We'd like to thank you all for joining us. If you're new to the podcast, please consider subscribing on your podcast player choice. That way you'll get each new episode as soon as it's released. If you've already subscribed, we'd appreciate if you'd share the show via social media or leave us a review. That'll help others find the show that much easier. Now, whether you're new to the podcast or you've been with us from the beginning, we'd love to get your thoughts on this week's show. Did you read the comics from Daredevil Volume 6 or that limited series? We'd love to get your thoughts on those. You can send us those comments via email. That address is comments@comicsovertime.com, or you can reach out to us on Blue Sky. We are at Comics Overtime there.
Excellent.
Dan, it was a lot of books, a lot of great things that came out in 2019. Obviously, this is not going to be a year that we're going to be able to duplicate again anytime soon, but I'm still really excited to see where we go in 2020.
Absolutely. It's going to be fun. We will talk to you all later. Have a great weekend.
Until next time, take care, everybody.